They laughed at Louis Armstrong when he said he was going to go to the moon. Now he's up there laughing at him. Welcome in to the Bro 4 Squad podcast, where we are just a bunch of bros drinking beer and talking movies. This is episode 181, and I'm your host, the mayor, Jeff Hornacek. Thank you guys so much for joining us for the movie discussion tonight. Before we get started, let's go around and meet my partner in crime tonight, our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli. Ronnie, had a weird incident today at work. My boss tried to fire me, but don't worry, I yelled, I object. So I still legally work there, right? I should show up tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, did he counter your objection?
They kicked me out of the meeting at that point, but I assume it's just because I won.
No, yeah, they're actually mad that you figured it out how to keep your job. If anything, they're all going to laugh tomorrow when he walk in at the 8 a.m. meeting.
We're going to have a good chuckle about this one.
They're like, Hornacek is emotional. He's a passionate person. He's, you know.
I'd imagine he'll come up to me and shake my hand and be like, damn well played.
Egg on my face.
There are people out there that are actually that delusional, though. We're like, I definitely won that exchange. You're like, sir, you were escorted out.
The George Costanza is what we call those people.
Should I not have done that? Was that frowned upon? All right, here on the Bro 4 Squad podcast, we normally begin every episode with the most important thing in any bro's life, and that is chess day. But tonight, we're actually going to bypass that. We've done this a few episodes, and it's our show. We make the rules, so try and stop me, Shmee. Don't try to stop me. Instead, we're going to go to our protein shake, which is typically the second part of our show, where we go around and talk about what is in our cup, also known as what have we watched lately, mainly because Cycli and I have many things that will cross over, and I think this portion of the show will actually be a little more in-depth than it typically is. So, Cycli,
well, can we admit really quickly why we don't have the chess day right now? It's like you and I spent like 45 minutes off pod just talking. We're like, oh shit, look what time it is. So sorry about that, guys.
Where does the time go? You know. All right, Cycli, do we want to start and get the stuff out of the way that we haven't seen together?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good place to start.
All right, I'll let you go first.
So I'll start with the one I've seen the least of so far, and that's a show called Inventing Anna on Netflix. Have you seen
Before
this?
you start, so the wife and I had watched The Tinder Swindler, and
yes,
this I have heard is basically like a dramatization of a similar story, and we were interested in it, but we clicked on it, and it's like 8 hour-long episodes each,
dude,
right? Maybe even more.
So my wife has already bailed.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying in a bad way, and that's what I kind of wanted to talk about. So again, you just hit the nail on the head. This is another show or miniseries or however you want to look at it about a quote unquote true story that I don't know. That like someone again swindled or faked her way to be in the upper echelon of Manhattan nightlife, right? Like
Fake
very
it to make it. You know?
Yeah, very, affluent and rich and going high society. And someone who is no one really knows who she really is. And the thing is, I mean, I think it'd be entertaining or interesting if we hadn't seen this 1,000 times already. This is not new anymore. I mean, since the internet age, since the show Catfish, or the movie Catfish, the internet has completely changed. And people used to do this for a long time before the internet, but obviously the internet has made it popular and easier to do, to just defraud your identity and others around you. And does it make for good TV or interesting stories? Absolutely. I just don't know how many times we get the same story that keeps people interesting. So right. Halfway through, my wife was like, not really feeling this. I'm like, okay, I'll stick it out. And then I've watched the second half of the second episode, first half of the second episode. And
it feels like a movie, right? It's like,
yeah, the second episode is an hour, 5 minutes. I was like, geez, what? I have a life, Netflix, but I just
and then
don't.
Netflix goes, but do you though?
But and they're like, fine, you're right, I don't. And the thing is, if you haven't watched a lot of these type of shows or movies, one of my favorite introductions into this world of true crime was I think you and I talked about this back in college, was the movie Imposter, that was based on a true story
Mm-hmm.
of a European, you know, fraudster, and I'm trying to think of another word for him. And
Like a
he
con
based
artist, basically.
con artist. That's right. Sorry, con artist. Perfect. And there's a family in Texas whose son had been missing for 10 years.
Oh yeah,
This guy shows up and claims he's the son that's been found. He was kidnapped and taken to Europe in a sex ring, and amazing movie. Actually, the movie is like half documentary, half drama. Like they dramatize what's happening, but not in a corny way. But my point is, like, this was 10, 15 years ago. This is so repetitive and common now. And I just don't know what Inventing Anna does for anyone, what we need to be watching this for. I mean, I
was going to ask, is there like a unique way that she sets up the con, or like, is there any, because I hate to be that guy, but like this story, again, like you said, it's sadly more ubiquitous than it was 10 years ago. Like you could Google this and there would be a billion results.
Well, and that's the thing. The story is told from the point of view of a journalist who is kind of, it seems like, on her last chance at not necessarily stardom, but like redemption and getting her name, to be known as someone who's a good journalist and reputable. And it's told for, like, she's basically hunting the story and trying to figure it out, and the story goes from there. And I don't see myself really finishing it. Maybe I will. Maybe it will catch me on. But I don't blame you guys for starting it and backing out. And I don't blame my wife for being like, no, you go ahead and watch it.
So I guess that's not a recommendation then.
Like I said, I think here's the thing. Okay. If you're not well versed in this genre of, not like of true crime, but really like con man true crime, and then I think it all for sure could be a great show. But if you've seen 10 of these already, I think murder true crime stories are pretty, more fun, because that sounds really horrible about murder, but every murder is like so unique, right? Like every motive is different and the way it goes about it. But like these con artists are pretty repetitive on the ability to how they manipulate and who they can target. Right. And there's people who are easily preyed upon for a reason. So in my opinion, unless you like really like have seen the story and you're interested in it, go watch it. If you haven't been interested in this genre before and not seen many of these shows or movies, I would say go watch it. But if you've, like me or us, have seen plenty of this, I say this is a skip, at least so far, 2 episodes in.
Yeah, the Tinder Swindler to me was nice because it was more compact, and I think
it was like a nice hour and a half, right?
Yeah. I just hate to say I'm a little desensitized to these stories now, kind of like you said. So if there's nothing there that's like a unique hook, then I might leave this one.
Yeah, what makes her special? Like, what makes this story special that I need to watch it?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, I watched the 1993 movie Leprechaun.
And you were texting me during.
I was going to say, I got to tell you, Cycly, you're one of my best friends, but you did nothing to stop me from starting this movie. In fact, you encouraged me.
And I would never stop you from watching this movie.
And before I get briefly into Leprechaun, I want to bring up just sort of an interesting question to pose. So all these franchises where it's like, I want to say horror adjacent, like it's definitely a horror movie, but it's definitely like it's comedy, it's comedic. And I think this movie at times has an idea for a laugh and it goes for it for sure. But at its core, I'm not sure if it's totally in on the joke, which is inherent where a lot of the comedy is. But here's the question. So with franchises like this, what leads to some of these decisions in terms of their installments? And I'll explain by stating this. So here are the first 3 installments in the Leprechaun franchise. There's Leprechaun, Leprechaun 2, and Leprechaun 3. And then Cycly, something must have happened with an exec where he's like, guys, we need more fucking juice. Because the next 3 Leprechaun movies in an already ridiculous franchise is Leprechaun 4 in Space, Leprechaun 5 in the Hood, and Leprechaun Back to the Hood, THA.
Of course.
So what's the thought process here where they realize, like, we need to just go full send insanity? Like, who's the guy that comes in as like, it's too grounded, bro? Leprechaun 3 is too gritty. It needs to be more over the top.
I have not seen these movies. I have heard many things. And Jennifer Aniston is in the first one, correct?
I believe just the first one, but yes.
Just the first one.
And it was, I think, one of her first movie roles. It was in '93. When did Friends start? That same year?
Around that, maybe a year or two later.
Okay.
I think here's the thing. We have to look at the 90s as a different time.
Yeah, Friends was the next year, I think.
Yeah, so the 90s, if you really break down the 90s movie, like we've talked about the Batman movies in the 90s repeatedly, right? Like, but think about how ridiculous so many plots were that came out of some of our 90s favorites. They're not the 90s were not a grounded era. Like, I think that's the least grounded era we've probably ever seen in film, maybe the 80s and 90s. And I think movies like Leprechaun, well, people didn't have, again, before people were listening, like there was no Netflix. You got like one movie on cable on a Friday night on NBC or ABC, right? Like you didn't get movies at home like we have so much access now. So people went to the movies all the time. Like that was it. If you go watch Seinfeld, go rewatch Seinfeld on Netflix. They literally in almost every other show talk about going to the movies. And I think that was a thing. That was a thing we would do. And so what do you do when like your entire population's form of entertainment consistently around the United States is going to the movie theaters, right? Like we're not talking about New Yorkers going to Broadway and having a lot of their options. We're talking about like rural Nebraska and, Montana. And
you drink behind the Walmart or you go to the movies,
Yeah, you go exactly. And we would do this when we grew up. And I think movies like Leprechaun, did they have to be good or grounded to get people in the seats? Absolutely not. Like, how much were the budgets and how much were they getting? The studios probably looked at it as, look, just make another one, make it ridiculous. People will still come for back then it was like, what, $3 a ticket, $4 a ticket, and they'll make money. And
$1 million budget made $8.6 million.
Shit, that's at 800% on return. So,
yeah, pretty solid.
Like, why not? And we see, like, you and I, bro, that still happens to this day. You and I will defend the Saw movies till we die. Do we need 10 of them? We're about to get a 10th one. But they're profitable. I'm not saying we want Saw in space, though I would be interested in that.
But so again, that's when the franchise knows that it's dead and it has to inject some.
Are you, as someone who loves the Fast and Furious franchise, I'm surprised you would say that.
Well, considering, spoiler alert for Fast 9, the fact that they did it finally, I was pretty upset in the theater. I think I was audibly screaming at the screen.
Like, stop this right now.
My wife was like, oh my God, they're actually doing this? And then when Ludacris enters space, I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ.
You're like, this is worse than The Last Jedi with Leia.
He's floating in orbit outside of the Earth. Ludacris. From Too Fast and Furious.
That is Ludacris. That's where his name comes from.
Holy shit, they've been setting that joke.
I like how we got from Leprechaun all the way here, but I think it's applicable. I mean, I think that's the reason.
Having said all that, Leprechaun I watched it by myself, it's probably more fun with a group if you're like drunk and having fun. And, it does what it's supposed to do. It's stupid. It's bad. I will say this, and I put this in my Letterboxd review. Jennifer Aniston is actually pretty good in it, considering like what she has to work with.
Did she take it seriously?
She does, yeah. And she's good. Like I get what any, producer would have seen at the time and been like, damn, she's a leading lady for sure. It's just so utterly ridiculous. The scene that I sent you is the Leprechaun on roller skates chasing the hero down the street. Crashes through a fence, and of course, the hole in the fence is in the exact shape of the
I feel like I have to watch this. I've heard so many things. I mean, this screams commentary.
Yeah, definitely. It's an hour 32 minutes, so it's very short. I won't even sit here and act like I'm not going to check out the second one. I just need to find a time when my wife is out of the house again. Because if she catches me watching this...
So, okay, I just want to make sure. It's not like Gremlins where it's like a lot of them. It's like, it's one Leprechaun.
It's one Leprechaun, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And is he evil like Chucky, or is he just like...
He's definitively evil, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like murder.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to... I don't want to
I
spoil
mean,
Leprechaun.
it's a horror movie. No, I just, I'm not saying he's going to kill a specific person.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, like, Chucky's a killer.
There's some gore in it. He's definitely ill-intentioned. And as a kid, look, I won't even lie either. In the 90s, like if I would have seen this movie when it came out, which I guess I would have been like 5 at that time. So, well, then it would have fucked me up. Like this guy would have scared the shit out of me. Because he has a very nefarious laugh too.
It's just not talked about like in the realm of like the movies that came out around that time, like the Chucky. Like I'm thinking specifically Chucky because that's probably really comparable, or Child's Play.
Because I'm looking at it according to Google, and I think some of these might be like in 2014 there was a Leprechaun Origins, and then in 2018 they did a Returns, which doesn't look like it's part of this franchise. Either way, there's 6 movies in the.
I didn't even know those existed.
Yeah,
you're talking about 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah. So, all right, Leprechaun 93. It's on Peacock. Don't watch it, but watch it. What else you got, Cycly?
Watched Doctor Sleep, which is I was texting you during this. So this is a sequel to The Shining. And
it's also
Shining,
a book too, because I know a lot of people were like, "Well, they're just gonna make a fucking sequel to The Shining." Like, no, Stephen King wrote a book. This book.
And second of all, it's also been like 35. This isn't like, oh, we got to get a Shining out. See, it's not like the next year, like Shining 2, Electric Boogaloo. Like, dude, like clearly they didn't wait this long for a reason.
You love Electric Boogaloo.
Ewan McGregor, he's basically the main. I mean, major cast. Rebecca Ferguson, Kylie Curran. I didn't know most of the cast, to be honest with you. But I think just
Carl Lumbly, who I think is great casting as Halloran because he looks exactly like him. He is in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then Bruce Greenwood I recognize too as Dr. Dalton.
Yeah, the casting, I will say, because they play this in the first 5 minutes of this movie take place immediately after The Shining, and I thought that was really well done. I think the role of the mother was obviously recasted because she's not around anymore, but it was very well done. Like she looked the part and acted the part, and so then the movie fast forwards like 40 years, 30 years, and Ewan McGregor, who is Danny Torrance grown up, has those experiences, and he basically still lives with his Shining, right? Like he can still hear people in his head. It doesn't go away, but it's driven him. His experiences with his dad and mom and The Shining has driven him to like severe alcoholism. Just like
his dad.
And he's a piece of shit. Like the movie's pretty dark. I'm not in a scary way. Like the first 30 minutes explore some really fucked up shit that Ewan McGregor's alcoholism causes. And some cool horror effects. That I don't want to spoil it because I don't, I would say, for some people this will be a good movie. But I really like what they did, especially in the beginning of the film. Then around like the 45-minute mark, and I was texting you this, the movie completely goes in a different direction than I ever thought.
Yeah.
What if you heard, okay, it's a sequel to Shining, you would think the movie takes place revolving around the hotel, the Overlook Hotel, the story with the family. It takes it again, not to give anything away, but the story really focuses on like this little cult who hunts and eats people with shining ability.
That's a leap from the first one.
It's a leap. Now, I like how they do it. At least start it. They hunt children. And it's done, again, this is shown in a really creepy way. Like they're kidnapping children and like not abusing them, but like you're seeing, I mean, they're not shy about showing some, some of the atrocities that they commit. And I was really liking that. That sounds really weird to say. But long term, this movie is a long runtime. I think it's over 2.5 hours.
Yeah, 2:32. I mean, that includes credits, but yeah.
Yeah. And at some point, it's a little much. It's a little long. There obviously is a climax at the Overlook Hotel that takes place probably in the last 20 minutes. That Danny Torrance finally accepts his ability and his he's going to work and help save this child who has a really strong shining ability. But it almost feels like, sounds really strange, and maybe those who are listening will agree, it sounds like a Twilight version or like vampire-esque version of I wouldn't even say of The Shining. It almost feels like a vampire movie, like not a teenage vampire movie like Twilight, but just a vampire
Like
movie.
Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah, and it would be like not a huge, but it'd be like if what would be I don't know, USA, what's a network that would do a dark, like a made for TV movie but a dark one?
Maybe like FX.
Yeah.
We give
It would
FX
be,
credit for everything on this pod.
yeah, because it wouldn't be, Lifetime or anything. It would be like, this is a very well made, at least this part of the film is a very well made TV movie.
TNT, maybe.
TNT would be a good one. Yeah. So I don't know if that dissuades people from watching. I enjoyed it. I think it's a little long on the runtime. The story kind of goes in a different direction. I didn't hate the way it went, but I would recommend it if you like The Shining, if you like Ewan McGregor and kind of like dark movies. I wouldn't say it's like you'll be happy you spent all that time watching it, but it was worth the watch, and I'm glad I did.
The Shining is one of the rare instances where I actually read the book before I saw the movie. And as a result, it always gives you a different experience when you have the book as your perspective or jumping off point. With this one, I think I might kind of be interested in doing the same thing, reading the book and then watching the movie. I will say the genre element to it is interesting. I'm not sure if I will dislike it or like it, but it's even listed as thriller fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't imagine, I haven't looked it up yet, and I'm not going to because that would require me to put my wine glass down with my left hand. But I think The Shining would just be thriller horror, right? I mean, like there's like some hallucinations in it, obviously, but I don't think I would classify the first one as a fantasy movie.
No, absolutely not. I get the fantasy part about this. There's definitely, like I said, horror elements, thriller elements. There are throwbacks to Shining that's what makes this movie really good when it's at its best. But there's a lot of this movie that like kind of lags, or you're just kind of like, am I watching the movie I thought I was going to be watching?
Yeah.
That's kind of the. So if I went on Reddit, like on the subreddit of our horror, and this was one of the most, like, just, I don't know, like people either loved this movie or hated this movie. People were like, this is one of the best sequels we've ever had. People were like, how can anyone like this movie? It's pure trash.
Do
it was
people
so
need
divisive.
to have seen The Shining to see? Because that's the other risk you run, and probably part of the reason why they began the movie with pretty much the direct ending to the first film. Because The Shining, it was like a 40-year-old movie. Like the amount of people that are like, okay, I'm ready to just pick up this story where it left off is probably few and far between. So is it effective as a standalone movie, you feel like, or do you definitely need the context of the first one to appreciate it?
The thing is, I think you could make it a standalone. Like if you cut this movie in a way to be about this little cult who hunts people who can shine, that's its own movie. Or you could do the direct linkage of this movie, of The Shining to this movie, and cut out the other part of it. But they decided to do both.
Dude, what if they did a thing like they did with Split, and it doesn't work because it's a book, but like the movie happens and at the very end you realize this kid is Danny Torrance from The Shining. Like he ends up at the Overlook Hotel, you're like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah, how did we get here?
Pretty cool.
It's just not what I thought it was going to be. That's all I would say. If you're looking for something that you're hearing, sequel to Shining, it's not what you would expect.
Yeah, that fantasy element can throw people off.
Yeah.
It made $85 million at the box office. I'm not sure what the budget was, but probably not a resounding success considering.
Yeah. I don't think I would consider that a success with considering how The Shining is such an iconic film.
Yeah. All right, I watched a movie called The 355. You might have heard of this. Came out in January. It's now on Peacock. I don't know if it was a day and date release on Peacock, but it's been on there for a little while. And it was one of the first theatrical releases of the year. It's kind of like an female's version of The Expendables, except with much more capable actors. Like The Expendables, it's like everyone who's washed up and they need the paycheck. The 355 is like Jessica Chastain, Diane Kruger, Lupita Nyong'o, Penelope Cruz. Like, that's what we're working with. Sebastian Stan is in it, which we need to get a.
in everything.
I was gonna say we need to get a Brosker Award for like he's in fucking everything.
Out of nowhere.
I think Sebastian Stan's in my kitchen right now. Like
I would watch out after watching Fresh.
Yeah,
you don't want him in your kitchen.
I probably should go check that out. And we'll actually talk about him here in a second. But Sebastian Stan is in this. He's great in everything. The like 4 female leads are awesome in this. Great to see them together in like a kick-ass action movie. The problem is it's just so paint by numbers, man. Like the quote-unquote twist, you see an absolute mile away. Like nothing surprising about that. And then like where the plot goes, there's nothing really unique about it. If you want to watch a movie of like some decent action scenes, not great, like there's no real good like car chase or vehicle scene in it. And the fighting is like decent, but it's not incredible. I don't know. It was not that good. What I was expecting was like a total popcorn thriller, cheesy explosions everywhere, chicks kicking dudes' asses. It's a lot more talking than I wanted. And again, every trick that it thinks it has up its sleeve, you're like, yeah, I know. Duh.
That's surprising because looking at the trailer, I would imagine like they were going all out on the like female action movie.
Yeah, I almost feel like it at times tries to shy away from that aspect. It may be afraid it's going to beat you over the head with it. But to my thing, I would say, and I know Charlie's Angels like bombed based on this premise, but Charlie's Angels almost seemed like its goal was to alienate men as opposed to empower women. And this film kind of feels like the latter. Like it feels like it did it the right way. And I just love Jessica Chastain, and I fully believe she could kick the shit out of any man that she wanted to. So it's very believable that she is her character in this. And I love Lupita Nyong'o, although they give her this completely superfluous British accent. I even looked it up. She's not British, so I don't know whose choice that was.
Hello, governor.
It's basically like that.
And
you're like, come again? Like she's Kenyan. I don't.
And it, bro, like
the Kenyans
no one wants to see this.
She's Kenyan and she was born in Mexico City. Now I understand that Kenya might have been colonized by the British, as was like every African nation, but she would not be speaking. Hello, I'm Lupita Nyong'o. How are you?
Nothing is the best British accent is Lily on How I Met Your Mother.
What bollocks? What's this about then? So the 355. I
was thinking about checking it out, but yeah. I feel like unless I really have nothing else to do after.
Right. It was one of those things where like I was like, hey, this is like one of the first quote unquote big releases of the year, and I've been meaning to get to it just because I like to see like all the important stuff from the year, and I hadn't. So I was like, all right, I'll give it a poke, have some time. It fell slightly below my expectations for it.
What was the reception overall?
I don't think great. Yeah. Not phenomenal. It's not going to anger you with how bad it is. It's just like, did we need this?
I'm getting to a point when like pure action movies, I don't give a shit. Like, don't give me the female male thing. Like, I don't care. Action movies are such a dime a dozen now. Like, I'm like, give me an actual story. Like, I don't know. Like, to me, I don't need to sit here and watch explosions and gunfights nonstop. I'm like, okay, I like that, but I'm just finding myself less interested in the genre in a weird way.
And it does set up for a sequel at the end, which I don't think we'll get because, according to a quick cursory Google search, this thing lost about $15 million between budget and box office. And you could attribute part of that to it being on Peacock. Not that there's many people like, well, we're either paying to go see the 355 in theaters or we're going to watch it at home. Like, I don't know if that's really a debate that's happening, but what at all is my incentive to go to the theater if I can just watch it on?
Yeah, and we've always talked on the pod. There's some movies you absolutely want to and need to see in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because it's an action film and you want the surround sound and you want the effects of the big screen, but I think we're past that, at least on these kind of movies.
And I am kind of getting, maybe worried is too strong of a word, but the action movie that isn't also a comedy is kind of a dying breed. Like, this movie, it's not like completely deadpan serious. Like, there's a few like dry humor jokes, but like, if it's not a Ryan Reynolds laughing and blowing things up, like, can it work anymore? Like, are we just going to go watch the straight up action film that isn't an IP or like a superhero movie, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a market for that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, James Bond has a market, right? Like, it could be an
Correct.
action movie, but it's like, how many more are we going to introduce?
I don't know. It's 355. Very soft recommend. All right, what else you got? Because we're about to hit the crossover area here.
Yeah, I think my last one that I have that you and I haven't seen together is Margin Call. This is a 2011 film that I had literally never heard of. I don't know how I hadn't heard of it because the cast, and I'll get into that in a second. But this was one of those nights, like my wife was out of town, and sometimes you just get sick of scrolling, right? Like you get when we were young and we would go through Blockbuster
Ugh.
or Hollywood Video, like that was the dream. That was the best. Like just walking around. But now, like just hitting the down button on Netflix or Hulu or HBO, it's like, dude, there's almost too many. You don't know what to do.
I
So
mean,
at
we
that,
literally everything is at our fingertips, and it really has desensitized us.
yes, I was thinking that yesterday. I'm like, there's nothing to watch. I'm like, dude, there's a literally like you would have killed someone 20 years ago to have this kind of access. Um, so I was just like, it was. She had been gone for a couple days. I was like, you know what? I'm sick of scrolling. Like I remember on the cover on Netflix was I saw Margin Call, and it was Penn Badgley, who we know from You, and he was in Gossip Girl. And there was Kevin Spacey and like Jeremy Irons. Like, what is this movie? And I said, you know what? Fuck this. I'm not going to even Google it. Literally didn't read the plot or anything. I just hit play. Turned out pretty good. It's now, so I'll get into the plot here. The movie takes place in 2008, right before the horrible financial crisis in the housing market burst. If you weren't really paying attention in 2008, maybe you're a little young, like what we're going through now or anything, that doesn't even come close to how bad things were in 2008. And basically, this film takes place over maybe 24 hours, maybe a little less than that, at a financial firm where they're doing some layoffs, and they lay off this guy who's the head of risk management. And he's like, why are you laying me off? Like, this makes no sense from a cost to benefit analysis. But he's like, whatever. And they get rid of him. And as he's walking out, one of his like subordinates comes and he's like, hey, I'm so sorry. We're going to miss you. And he hands him a disk drive, and he's like, hey, finish what I was working on. Be careful though. Like
Yeah.
that's the last time the elevator closes. And I'm not going to give anything much more away, but it's based loosely on the true story of what happened in 2008 with these financial firms. So it's not really a spoiler, but basically this employer who decides to stay out late, like stay in the office late because, there's layoffs. So he wants to look good, opens this disk drive and finishes the work that his boss had been doing. And he realizes something horrible. He realizes that we're on this cusp of like a financial crash.
Right.
And basically the movie takes place at like 9 o'clock at night, and what happens until the start of day. And it starts with going to one boss, who's Kevin Spacey. Then Kevin Spacey goes to the next boss and goes to the next boss until Jeremy Irons is the CEO. And they're having meetings at 5 a.m., realizing that all of these projections are showing that all of their assets are going to be worthless
Right.
in a few weeks or months, and that they're good. It's the losses are going to be more than the worth of the company. And so what do you do? And it's basically the precipice or the start of what caused the 2008 financial crisis. And you and I talked off pod. We talked about Big Short, about how these movies can be a little convoluted and difficult and slow.
Because they're just concepts, and I'm an
Yeah.
idiot, I guess, but they're just concepts that are
No.
so over my head that it's sometimes hard to enjoy the story.
I don't. It is nothing to like, dude. To anyone, I mean, I don't think unless you are living that industry that these are things are supposed to make sense. And the movie does try to like bring it down to an understanding level. It's just it's a slow movie, so you have to be in the mood for this. I would absolutely recommend it, but you have to be in the right state of mind. If you're feeling something that's very character driven and a slow burn without a lot of payoff, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. Sometimes movies like Zodiac, where like they're true stories and there's no climactic ending, right?
Right.
Like you're getting a story. You're not watching for the crescendo at the end. So if you're okay with that, I would absolutely recommend this movie. This cast list is absolutely insane. So I said Kevin Spacey, Jeremy Irons, Stanley Tucci, Paul Badgley, Simon Baker, Demi Moore, Ashley Williams, who, if you know How I Met Your Mother, we love. But it's just,
Zachary Quinto, Spock.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I don't even know how this movie, I don't know how I hadn't heard about this movie. I don't know. Had you heard about this movie at all?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah. Paul Bettany, who I fucking love in A Knight's Tale. You know, I was like, what? He's in this too? But it's good encore cast.
Stanley Tucci's great in everything he shows up in.
Yeah, he's the guy who actually gets fired at the beginning.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
is he bald in it? He has to be bald in everything, right?
He is. Yes.
Okay, good.
It's again, if you remember the 2008 crisis, like I think it'd be interesting. You learn a lot. You know, it teaches you some things that you didn't know. But if you're wanting something like, you know, highly entertaining, I don't think this is the movie, at least at that time, for you. So maybe it just be in the mindset for it.
Would you say it is better than The Big Short? Which, again, I'm not a huge fan of. I don't know how much you like it.
I think they're very different films while they're like broaching the same subject, because this, again, takes place in one night.
Gotcha. And that's the problem with The Big Short. I feel like it's very elongated storytelling.
Yeah. And I liked this movie because it showed the thought process of these financial firms who we as society, and I'm not agreeing with them. I'm on the side of society that can say, like, you fucked us over in the economy and you caused a crash on purpose to save yourself money.
Mm-hmm.
But it lets you at least see, and again, this movie is not defending them, but you're seeing this line of thinking about how these people are thinking. Like, they're saying, if it's not us, someone else is going to do this. And Kevin Spacey, who just is ironic because of course what we know about Kevin Spacey now, he's a big proponent. Like, he is struggling with his morale, what he's asked to do and what he needs to do, of course. And you're seeing people, like, they're putting people in the job they know, like, hey, saying, we need you to do this, and at the end of the day, you're not going to have a job.
Yeah.
Like, it's a pretty intense movie in that way. But again, no big crescendo, no big payoff here. Just a character-driven, well-written movie.
I guess it is kind of an interesting. I kind of like the idea of, like, is this inevitable anyway, and is me saving my ass, like, really not preventing anything, or is it just such bad optics that it's sort of indefensible at the end of the day? Like, that's sort of an interesting moral dilemma.
Jeremy Irons, who plays the CEO, literally mentions to his staff he mentions every crash in the history, like starting from the early 1900s.
Yeah.
It's saying, this is not the last one. This is the first one. It's like, we're just going to be proactive here.
I mean, it sounds horrible to say. It sounds callous, but it's also not wrong.
It's capitalism, baby.
Yeah, 100%. All right, I don't know if you watched this. I know we were texting about it. Scream 3. Did you go back and revisit this?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I think we both fell asleep at the same time.
Correct.
But I had seen it before, and you hadn't.
I know, and I felt bad, but it
was late.
Yeah, I fell asleep, like, beginning of the third act, so, like, shit hadn't quite hit the fan yet. And I won't spoil this at all, because I know a lot of people are going back and revisiting the Scream movies. Because the Scream, what is it, 5 now? Is the new one that's on Paramount Plus?
And we're getting a 6th one officially.
Yeah, which I'm pumped about, because I really like the new one. Scream 3, let me say this, Cycle. You had told me before that sort of the fan consensus is that this is the weakest Scream movie. Is that right?
But not in a horrible way.
I was going to say, if that's the case, this is a strong as fuck franchise. If this is your worst entry, because I thought this was still pretty dang good. I mean, it wasn't like mind-blowing at all, and you definitely kind of feel like, and this is where I could sort of feel bad for Wes Craven that these movies were so successful, because they do, like, the whole premise of Scream can get tired pretty quickly. That's why, like, after we get Scream 6, I'm totally cool with taking, like, another 6-7 years off. You know, because, like, the meta component of it works, but it can be overdone. Like Deadpool, I'm glad we've had 5 or 6 years between Deadpool 2 and Deadpool 3, because like the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I'm in a movie thing is funny, but at a certain point, it's like, all right, dude, do you have
Like, how
anything
many
else?
times am I going to put myself through this? Yeah.
Right. And I will say what Scream 3 does is it tries to subvert sort of the concept of it by putting it in a completely different, like it's meta on meta in this one, in the sense that like the murders are happening involving
Movie
around the
studio.
movie based on the murders that are happening.
Yeah.
In a movie.
How meta can we get?
Correct. Yeah. And I think the only thing that sort of falls short for me, I won't spoil anything obviously, but what they end up doing at the end of the film, like where they went with it, it didn't feel meta at that point. It felt like they fell into another trope. And that could be like Wes Craven getting notes from the studio or whatever. But for the most part, I enjoyed it. And I'm excited to see Scream 4, which I've never seen. That's the last one I have to watch.
And I'm excited for you to see that, because I've only seen Scream 4 once. But going online again, that is, people are saying that's arguably the second best one. There's like
including the new one?
Including the new one.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think 4, 5, and 2 are, kind of up there fighting for that position. And I think that's where Scream 3 is kind of left on its own. Not that Scream 3 is a bad movie. I felt the same way. I've seen it multiple times. I mean, now Courtney Cox's hair is I don't know what the fuck was going on
That's
there.
probably the most horrific part of the film.
She actually talks about, like, you can look up interviews about this, because that is not something just like random people notice. It was
atrocious. Like they were trying to pull like a Rachel from Friends, like we're gonna make a fucking fashion statement, and you're like,
God,
this is the Zeppelin of hairstyles. Like it is crashing, burning.
It's the haircut I gave to my sister's nutcracker when I was like 4 years old, thinking like the hair would grow back.
If you're at summer camp and you're a girl and you're pranking like your arch enemy, and she's asleep, this is how you would cut her hair.
Yes. Lindsay Lohan would do it to Amanda Bynes. I feel like that should have been a film. But yeah, like I'm with you. Like Scream 3 is a very commendable add to the franchise. Like, I mean, can you hit a home run every single time? Like,
no.
Fuck, Scream might be up there with 5+ movies, like, of the best to do it consistently. We've talked about all the Saw movies. It is pretty impressive how they can do this. So you can't be mad at a movie for having a little bit of drop off, and it makes sense that the third one does.
Yeah. And again, if this is the worst, I have to say the Scream movies, like I'd seen the first one many years ago, and as a horror fan, this was still kind of like a blind spot to me. But if this is the worst installment, dude, it's one of the best horror franchises to ever exist. Mm-hmm. And not that that's a hot take, but just count me in the consensus of people that feel that way about it.
Yeah. And I love it. Again, we've said this 1,000 times, Hammer at Home, because it's a horror movie, but it's a horror movie for horror fans.
Right.
Like, we are enjoying the commentary along the ride.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. The things that you would normally critique a horror movie for, it cuts you off on the pass to make that statement. It's like, no, I know, and here's my rebuttal. And you're like, damn.
No, we're agreeing with you.
Yes,
like,
you're correct. I hate when horror movies do that. Like, no, you need to just let me just have this criticism. All right, do you have anything else that we haven't watched? Otherwise, you guys...
Not that we haven't watched together yet.
All right, pick whatever you want that we have seen together. I have one more thing, but I'll just bring it up at the very end. It's really brief.
No, feel free.
All right, I'll knock it out real quick. So you and I always agree, and I don't think it's, again, some epiphany that we've had, because everyone kind of feels this way. You need some trash reality TV show that you're watching, like currently, because this is everyone. We all work too damn hard during the day. When you get home, you need to be able to turn your brain off and watch drunken idiots on a reality TV show that make you feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
And the current show for me here, and I cannot recommend this highly enough, and I'm telling you, dude, you might think at home that Peacock sponsors this podcast, because the stock in my current feelings of Peacock has been on an astronomical climb, and this show is on there. Summer House. It has 6 seasons, and my wife and I just watched season 1. It started in 2016, I think. Have you ever heard of this show?
No, that's why I was looking it up. I'm like, huh?
Okay, so the premise is, so in New York City, a lot of like people who can afford it, obviously, will rent summer houses in Montauk up the shore. And then every weekend, they'll all drive up there, go to the house, get drunk and party on the beach, forget about the stress of their lives and their job. and then they'll drive back on Sunday night or sometimes like early Monday morning to work with their week again and then come back. And this always culminates with a big Labor Day party at the end of summer. Well, Summer House is just about that. It follows a group of people. It's a reality TV show who rent a house in Montauk, and it really briefly follows them like at their jobs during the week. But I'd say 90% of it is them getting drunk. They're like mid-20s to early 30s people at this house in Montauk, going out to the bars in Montauk, partying at the house, and just, as you can imagine, the chaos that ensues. And it is utterly fucking ridiculous, but so goddamn entertaining.
How does this show have 6 seasons?
I don't know, because I think each year they like kind of change up who's in the house with them, you know, like who gets to rent it. Like some people come visit and stuff. And if they meet someone out at the bar or go to someone else's house to hook up with them, they call it playing an away game.
Great. So I just looked it up. So I started on Bravo.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So it's and again, Peacock. It's just easy to plow through this.
Two things I'll say, like, and I absolutely happy to admit, I thought it was better than. First off, Peacock. You know, a year ago,
yeah,
I was very much like the Regina George meme. Stop trying to make Peacock happen. It's not going to happen.
Seriously, though, that was me too.
Like, it was like only The Office. I mean, I know they have a lot of soccer. Again, I've said on the pod, a huge soccer fan. They have the Premier League on there. That's great. So that kept me in. And then all of a sudden, they went in on movies and shows. But two, and it's only because of COVID that I gave my first reality show a chance. And fuck, you know what, dude? Yeah, you're right. You know, you need this. You
One of
need
these at least, yeah.
You need some, like, it again. We all work hard. We all like have, you know, our monotony of the day to day. Like, dude, sometimes it's good to like put on and watch stupid people be trashy and make you feel, like you said, better for yourself.
Like
boost that confidence.
After a hard day's work and it's like a fucking Wednesday night and you're like, Jesus, fucking beaten down. Sometimes you don't want to watch something that's intellectually stimulating. And I don't feel like I should. I either want to watch this or play my WCW N64 game. You know what I'm saying? Let me turn my brain off and be a fucking mindless Cro-Magnon for 2 seconds.
Yeah. And, you know, I used to think I was like, oh, you watch reality TV shows. Oh my God. Like, I'm like, dude, fuck, you're watching reality TV. Yeah. I was literally at a pub like 2 weeks ago, and we were talking to this other couple that were like, have you seen Love is Blind? And we're like, oh shit, did you see? Like, it was like, this is stupid, but I love it.
I know, it's great. And the great thing about Summer House, we usually watch it like right before we go to bed, and it's like every single episode we're laughing at people and making fun of them, and we'll pause it and just like debate how fucking utterly absurd these people are. And the best part is they're drunk 90% of the time. It's incredible.
Like those livers, man.
I really don't know how. I don't know how they're all not like 300 pounds.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I'll have one beer. I'm like, oh God.
Seriously, I'm bloated. Ugh.
Guys, I got to move to liquor.
All right, Cycly. What else?
All right. So should we? Let's see. How about we just tackle Wizard of Oz, because I think we can do that quickly. Because recently we just watched. You were dropping it next week?
Yeah, by the time this episode's out, it'll already be on our channel.
Great. So we did a commentary on Wizard of Oz, one of the most iconic and memorable and most watched films of all time, if not the most watched film of all time.
I think we actually said on there, there are several studies, maybe not the most reliable, but that claim it has probably been seen more than any other movie.
And honestly, it makes sense. I mean, we talked about that on this on the commentary. So we probably don't want to get too into this on this on this podcast episode. So we just recommend that you watch Wizard of Oz, the commentary with us, because obviously there's, you know, you've seen the movie, everyone's seen the movie. There's no spoilers here.
It's on HBO Max, by the way.
What I'd like to say is, if you don't know about the making of this movie, everyone knows this movie, everyone knows the songs, everyone knows the characters, but the behind the scenes of this movie is one of the most fucked up, dark, twisted, depressing movie sets probably in history. I mean, there's probably others that we don't know about, but in terms of the ratio of like how famous the movie is, like, I don't think you can get more like depressing and dark. Like, well, yeah, I'm sure there was more fucked up shit, but
I don't think it's huge. Crazy to say that comparing this to like the movie Rust, which shut down production because someone died on the set of Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Like, if
Yeah.
this movie were made now, it would have been shut down in production.
Yeah. Judy Garland's getting abused by the set directors. She is getting groped and molested by the chipmunks. Uh, oh my God, what are their names?
Munchkins?
Munchkins. Why did I say chipmunks? Yeah, Munchkins, who were reportedly drunk for like the entire filming.
Jesus.
72 hours at a time, they would just film nonstop. Yeah, I mean, you can talk about why like actors have strong unions today. Like this movie is one
The
of those
dog was
reasons.
paid more than the Munchkins, not a joke.
Yeah, not a joke.
So,
The witch, we didn't talk about this on the commentary. She gets caught on fire, like in real life,
oh,
like
no.
has severe burns that she had to live with. We talked about the Tin Man, Scarecrow, and what they had to go through and their scars. So I don't want to like spoil any of it. I'm just saying, like this movie is more than that beloved Wizard of Oz movie, and
Yeah,
it was
and
a fun episode to go through.
if I'm being honest, it really kind of fucking really shifts my view of the film. Like, I don't know if I revere it anymore, knowing what we had to go through to get it as a piece of art.
I respect it because it was so iconic, but it's kind of like love the art, not the artist.
I guess maybe it's just like as a culture, we just have a naivety to it, right? It's like, oh, it's the Wizard of Oz. It's very fantastical and it's a piece of cinematography or cinema that we'll always cherish. And you're like, yeah, dude, but it was like milking blood from a stone to get this movie. Like at what cost?
Yeah. My God. Like I said, it's a fun one to go back and revisit. What is the cost? I don't know. 1939. No standards back then, but everyone knows this movie. I want to see the documentary about the making of this
God,
movie.
that would
That's
be
what I want.
awesome.
I want I want that. I want the 8-part series of the making of Wizard of Oz.
Dude, that would
I don't think we could watch it again. I feel like you get to real depth on this. I think you and I would be like, dude, I can't do this.
yeah, we'd probably be like, yeah, I thought I wanted this. Can we stop it now?
Yeah, but yeah, we'll let the rest of. I mean, at least for my part, if you want to say anything else, but I would recommend going and listen to that one because that was an interesting commentary than we usually do because we learn a lot about. We talk about a lot about what's going on in the background.
Right. Yeah, maybe more so than any movie. So I would definitely recommend it. It's on HBO Max, like I said, so you can go listen to our commentary and watch the movie with us. Pam and Tommy, the Hulu show. Finished this. I have to say, I know we've been talking about this weekly. What was it, 6? Was it 6 episodes or 8?
7, 8?
7, that sounds right. I think cyclically it ended. We were a little bit skeptical last week, or even like 2 weeks ago, like what story is there left to tell? And I think it ended on a good crescendo. I think this thing peaked in its last episode, or at least it came close to hitting that apex that it had. I think episode 2 is probably its strong point, but definitely ends on a high note for me. It's one of those nice limited series where you kind of know the whole time that Hulu isn't going to try and tease you with some weird follow-up season that you might be like left not completely satisfied because it's just not how the story lends itself.
Well, they could get remarried in real life, so maybe
that's true. And let me ask you that. I guess I guess there's only no way to talk about it without spoilers. So
I mean, if you don't know the story, really, I don't know how
that's
we're supposed
true.
to.
But if you haven't seen Pam and Tommy and you want to skip ahead or don't want to know, skip ahead. Maybe hit that 30-second forward button like 3 or 4 times. But were you satisfied with where it ended? Because I feel like there's still is a lot more, not a lot more, but there are interesting parts to the story that they didn't touch on. And the way it ends, man, you just kind of feel bad for them as a couple. Like I know before this show came out, a lot of people were like, how's it going to portray Pam and Tommy? I definitely feel like they both come across as sympathetic figures. Tommy Lee in his own Tommy Lee way, but of course, especially Pamela Anderson.
Yeah, that's a good point because I mean the show ends with Pamela Anderson as icon, like as just everyone knows her. No one knows her as the person she probably wants to be known as, right? Like I mean, you feel that in the show. She really has ambitions to be taken seriously as an actress, to go for serious roles. and they obviously never come. I mean, I don't think that's a lot due to, her ability. I think that's a lot of it's her talent. I mean, not to be rude about it, but she did want that. She wasn't there just to be a playboy. While I think she had to fit that mold and narrative just because that was what society put on her. And Tommy Lee, his fame was really the 80s, and who gives a shit about Motley Crue starting in the 90s?
Yeah.
And I think that was an interesting way to end it. It's just basically Pamela and Tommy looking at their lives like, oh, the prime is past now. Like, and that is a depressing way to kind of look at it, but it is true. I mean, this is a true story. I think the show could have skipped a little bit of the litigation portion. They abandoned the Seth Rogen and
Nick Offerman.
Nick Offerman portion
Yeah.
of the story. I think they could have gone a little deeper with that and what went down.
Because that's where it had its most momentum to me.
I think so too. I think they really abandoned that in the middle part of the series. So, I mean, we know that. We know Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee basically go off the deep end in their fame in the early 2000s. Tommy Lee especially goes to jail, and I mean, who gives a shit about him now? But I think this show it could have been a 2.5 hour movie or 2 hour movie.
It would have been better as that. I agree.
Yeah. Or just maybe a 4-parter. I don't think we needed 7 episodes. I enjoyed it. I'm not going to complain, but I think there was a lot of gaps here and it ended well, but we should have gotten to that earlier.
I think the tough part here, and we've echoed this a couple times on the pod, but is there's really 3 stories, and you kind of have to pick which one you want to tell for it to really feel like it's focused as a show. So there's the heist element, right? Like Seth Rogen's character being wronged and getting his vindication by sort of lucking into this tape and what it means to him. But it's also about like the small guy who's been stepped on his whole life, finding some method to fight back.
His manhood being small, actually.
Yes, he has a small penis. And sort of his moral dilemma with doing that, because that is a really interesting part of the story. Then there is the cultural impact of this sex tape. Like, is it going too far to say that this like made the internet like populous?
Mm-hmm.
Like when
I don't think it is.
It made porn literally online when people were like, oh, I can just click a thing and there's sex. I mean, that's like a whole crazy.
Yeah, I've never done that, so I don't know that side of the internet.
I know.
Personally.
We'll have to. One day I'll explain it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
How to do it, and when a man loves a woman, what happens as well.
Yeah, I would love to know that. I think I've heard birds and bees are involved. I don't understand that.
See, that's a common misconception. And maybe birds and bees fuck each other, but I don't think it's... We'll Google it, actually. I'll show you on the internet. Look at
it. Comment below if you can explain that.
Please don't. And then the third part is, again, which I think they sort of go in and out of focusing on, especially early. Like Pam and Tommy are really not a big part of the first 2 episodes, relatively speaking. But it's like how this affected them, which is like, I think the emotional crux of the story. And they sort of weave in and out of each. And at the end of the day, it sort of feels like all 3 of those stories are sort of not quite told to their full potential, I think.
Yeah.
As a result.
Yeah, I'm with you completely.
But it does end on a strong note. I would definitely recommend it to anyone, especially if you like we're kids of the 90s, so this was like the very beginning of like us being able to kind of understand what the fuck was happening, right?
Yeah. If you're a 2000s kid, you absolutely have to watch this. Not just for the Pamela Anderson story, like just because that was so interesting. This is probably one of the best. I mean, Social Network's up there, but that was just for Facebook. Like, this is one of the better shows that really was able to like reflect what that like beginning of internet age was like. Because I remember that clearly. I'm sure you do too. Like we were the perfect generation. The people who grew up after us, and if you're listening, like I said, if you're a 2000s kid, you know the internet. You've only known the internet. Like maybe it was slower when you or you didn't have as much power or like the phone in your pocket. But this is a perfect show to really show you like where that change occurred and what it was like before that.
And at the time, obviously, you don't realize how big of a game changer this is going to be. But even like the parts of Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson, like, what the fuck is the internet? Like, well, you guys are about to make it a thing.
People don't even realize how much. Again, I remember this, like people saying the internet is just a fad and it won't
Oh
go
yeah,
away.
there's I think a New York Times article that says that, right? Like, internet will be like
Yeah.
fucking Polly Pocket and Tamagotchi.
That writer's like any day now.
Come on. All right, do you want to talk the show or the movie that we have left? Only two things.
Which
Okay, I want to save this show for
Oh
last.
yeah, no, let's do both.
Let's let's talk Windfall
Okay.
first. So this came out as we're recording this last Friday on Netflix. And I have to say, cyclically, as I've been looking at the movie release schedule this year, it's great that we are getting so many interesting releases on streaming, that this is more ubiquitous now, because it's nice to have a movie you can look forward to throughout the week and know that we don't have to somehow find time and convince our wives to go to the theaters to watch it, right?
Yeah. Which is funny, by the way, because you referenced how I didn't stop you watch Leprechaun.
Mm-hmm.
You tried to get me to stop.
But I
You
also
didn't
wanted
want
you
me
to
to watch
watch
this movie.
Windfall. So
But
Windfall
you had a text message like, "Hey, don't watch this," and I was
but
like,
also
"Fuck you, I'm going to."
Windfall. I mean, I was pretty pumped for this movie. So this stars Jesse Plemons, Lily Collins. They're
Meth
a married
Damon
couple.
is he's better known as.
Beth Damon. That's an incredible fucking nickname. And then dare I say the return of Jason Segel
Ew.
in a rare acting role, a serious dramatic role. And he actually conceptualized the story for this. He did not pen the screenplay, but came up with the story. So, which I feel like, and we'll get into this in a second. The guy who wrote the screenplay did fucking nothing. So, like, I don't know what do you want credit for? Cycling, what would you describe the plot to Windfall as?
Basically, a comment. We don't really know. That's the point of the movie. We don't get names in the movie. Let's just say that we don't get any
Yeah, I didn't
background.
realize that till afterwards. I was like, what's so and so's name? My wife was
No
like,
one has a
it
name.
says their name. Yeah.
Yeah. But basically, it's someone in society who is downtrodden, or we don't really know his personal life, but he's not high on his luck, and he decides to go rob a billionaire summer home. And he knows he has evidence that the billionaire is out of town, so he should have the place to himself. And a little does he know that the billionaire and his wife have gotten away for the weekend and are going to spend the weekend at the house, and shit ensues because he is in the midst of a robbery.
Yeah. And I love the framing device of a film taking place in like a confined time period. And it takes place over a 24-hour period or less, I guess.
Maybe slightly
No, more.
more, like, because yeah,
Yeah, that's right, because you're right. So
I think
probably
they
like
have 2 nights. Yeah,
maybe like 30 hours, 36 hours,
yeah.
something like that, which was interesting. But skip ahead, 2 minutes if you don't want Windfall spoiled for you. But trust me, you're not.
Actually, you do want this.
You do want it. I gotta say, cycling, this felt like a stage play. Like this
That's
felt
very
like
good.
it's all one setting and nothing really happens. It's all dialogue heavy. And I feel like at the very end, when the movie like culminates and we have our final set piece. Set piece is not an apt description, but
I like it. Yeah.
when things conclude, it's like we have barely moved from the starting line of this movie,
Yeah.
and what little movement we've made, the character motivation really doesn't make sense.
This, I think you just literally knocked it out of the park. This should be, and I'm sure it could be, a one-act play off Broadway. Like
Definitely.
that would be perfect. And because the strengths of the film, I don't. You and I both probably didn't, and won't give it our recommendation. But the strengths of the film, the acting was fine. The writing was like I didn't have a problem with like Jason Segel in the movie. Like I thought everyone performed admirably. I thought it was well acted. I thought it was well written. Thought it was well shot. Like usually when you have all of those, that come together, if you have all three of those equations, you're coming out with a good movie. This movie just doesn't have it the right, like the script. You know, there's no purpose almost. And I get that you can say that's the point. Does life have a purpose? We can go really deep here. but that's a thing. It doesn't feel like it fits. It doesn't know what it wants to be.
And it's interesting because, and I'm glad you put it that way because it's like the script keeps all the characters very close to the vest. Like it almost doesn't want us to know them. But then at the end, it's like, oh, but they have this big plot development and character turn. I'm like, yeah, but you don't want me to know these people the whole time. Like, how am I now supposed to like feel anything when this
And
happens?
and that's where I struggle. And definitely fast forward a minute here if you don't want to have this spoiled, even going against our wishes. But here's where I texted you about this. The wife, right? The whole climax of the film is the wife just being sick of her husband's shit, right? Like she's not on her husband's side. She's obviously not on the burglar side. She's just done. But they didn't work to that. They didn't work us as the audience to watch this couple be berated by a intruder and watch them succumb maybe with Stockholm syndrome or going through their range of emotions and deniability and accept. There was none of this. She from the get-go was immediately critical of her husband and annoyed with her husband.
This was
And
like a convenient thing to happen to her, really.
yeah, and so the whole time I honestly was thinking, oh, this is all a play. This is them outsmarting him.
Yeah, actually,
Like
that's not a bad way to interpret it. That would have been honestly, and maybe if this happened, I probably would have bitched and moaned. But to me, that's more interesting than what they actually went with.
well, if the result was what they wanted to do is that the wife had issues and was sick of her husband and maybe he was abusive, they should have had it more of a turn and had it more of a mental dilemma and anguish and
Yeah.
struggle. Like that didn't exist. They were the same characters at the beginning, at the end. She was just sick of being under duress.
Well, it's like what response do you want to elicit from me? Do you want me to empathize with her? Do you want me to hate her? Because really, at the end, I'm just like, oh, you guys, everyone here sucks.
Yeah. We have a billionaire. We have a woman who is like, I'm a victim. Yes, I married a billionaire, but that's not why, I have my own identity.
And he's a dick and he's eccentric, but he's not like, dude, he's not that like. There's way worse people out
No.
there to be married
Make
to.
him have like fucking child sex ring or like what, like, I'm like, why am I supposed to hate him? I mean, I get it. Like, billionaires, like all whatever, like they take from society. Fine. That's not the argument the movie's even trying to make though. Like, like
Yeah, I don't
make
know.
him an actual villain.
Yeah, and Jason Segel, who's obviously very selective with his roles, to put it like maybe mildly, but it feels like a lot to get him out of bed for a movie these days, which is fine, man. He's worked his ass off. He's got royalties from How I Met Your Mother for the rest of his life, but for him to like be intrigued enough to write the story to this and come out and act in it, I just don't know what this movie is really.
But I feel like, and I love Jason. I mean, you and I are in a conundrum because we love Jason Segel. You and I are such How I Met Your Mother fans, such Muppet fans.
Forgetting
Like,
Sarah Marshall,
for
say
Gershon
both
Marshall,
like
like, I love you, man. Like,
Mhm.
he's so fantastic. But then at the same time, there's this like arrogance to him that like he's above all the things that we love. It feels like he hates.
Yeah.
It feels like he wishes he hadn't done them. And so it almost makes me feel like he doesn't like us for liking those roles. Like he doesn't like us as fans for appreciating those things he did. And so he does these kind of films and that you and I are like, well, what was the point? He's probably like, fuck yeah, man, that's what I wanted. I didn't want anyone to get it.
And again, maybe he gets some sick pleasure out of that. Congrats. So Windfall, I was very much looking forward to it, especially when I saw the trailer and the cast and all that, but falls very short of expectations, I think.
It is, but I will say again, you told me this. I chose to watch it. It is 90 minutes.
Yeah.
It is not a long, it is a very slow burn if there's a burn at all. I didn't mind watching it. Like, to be honest with you, I'm not saying I hated it. Like, it is well acted, it's well shot, but if you're in the mood for that, watch it. I think you'll feel the same. But it just, I don't know what it's trying to be. I'm still figuring it out.
And oh, man, it's one of those movies where we should almost do like a whole pod about this. We're like, all right, if you stopped watching this movie after the second act, how would you think it ends? And I feel like if you would have said that to me with this film, I would have given it way too much credit. Like my
Mhm.
mind, dude, if you and I could have like both watched it separately, stopped, and then called each other after the second act, think of the fucking theories we would have had on how this thing's gonna end.
Right. Yeah.
Because it feels so ominous and like it's really setting you up for something.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like I think we actually made the Ryan Johnson comp, if I think about it. But in a Ryan Johnson way, it laughs in your face for having high expectations of it.
Yeah. And I get it. Someone could be listening like, that's the point. Not everything has to do that. That's not how life works. Or like, I get it, and I'm with you. And that's why part of the movie I am appreciative of. But that doesn't mean I
But
have to
that's
sit
fair.
there and watch that movie
Right.
and love it.
But also, I'm allowed to hate that, you know?
Exactly. That's not what we're watching movies for.
We don't hate much on this podcast, but
No.
Ryan Johnson and this movie are that. All right, last thing, Cycly, and something that hits very close to our heart. What did we watch together? Or not together, but
We finished How I Met Your Father season 1. Talking about Jason Segel.
Yeah, and I think it's important to give the context, which we kind of referenced earlier. We are massive How I Met Your Mother heads, like diehards. I'm on my fourth full series rewatch right now.
See, I don't believe you. There's no way it's only your 4th. Dude, I feel like I'm at least almost at 10 rewatches.
So I've seen every episode, like or like the key, 100 episodes, probably 7 or 8 times each. But I'm talking like episode
From
1
okay.
through 216. Yeah, this is probably my fourth time doing it in sequence.
Okay.
And we are about 30 episodes away from the finale. So, How I Met Your Father, this was a 10-episode first season order on Hulu, week-to-week episode releases. It's sort of the rare sitcom that we get now, and especially one that's not on network, which I got to be honest, I love the concept of a sitcom on streaming. And I think the streamers do too. We were a little bit up and down with this, but I think we always said it had a high floor, meaning like at its worst, it was not going to be something that we were like super pissed off at just because inherently we weren't expecting that much of it. What do you think about how it ended, and I guess the season on the whole, knowing we're getting a second season?
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. Like you and I were saying, look, even if it's really terrible, I can sacrifice 22 minutes a week just to see kind of like what they do with the story. Maybe we weren't going to go past one season originally thought, depending on how it turned out. But why not watch 10 episodes at 22 minutes? Not a big deal. We can sacrifice that, especially for such a beloved show that it was based on. The show itself, like I think it is exactly what I thought it was going to be. It had decent. It was good at some parts, and it was really bad at some parts. There was a lot of discontinuity between the characters. There was a lot of disjointedness. There was a lot of like actors trying to figure out who their characters were. But you know what? That happens a lot of season 1 in sitcoms. Look at The Office. Look at Seinfeld. Even How I Met Your Mother. Friends season 1 is just to me unwatchable. But that's my point. So like I think we signed up knowing that we were going to get something not too great. And so when it was good, it was very like appealing. It was like, hey, you know what? It's exceeding expectations. When it was bad, it was like you said, high floor. It was like, oh, this is what I thought. I thought it ended really well. I thought we got some How I Met Your Mother. What made How I Met Your Mother good compared to other sitcoms was its emotional element. It was the fact that there was a story and continuity involved. You watch an episode of Seinfeld on its own, and it's a hilarious show. You don't need to know the backstory. You can even watch Friends. Does knowing the show help? Absolutely. But same with Office. You can just pick a random show. How I Met Your Mother is inherently only as good as it can be if you watch the whole show. And I think How I Met Your Father kind of felt that way. You had to be along for the ride and enjoy episode 10 as it was. I am excited. We're getting 20 episodes now for season 2. And
Yeah,
I think
they need the runway to flesh characters out more, to be honest.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, because that's a really good point, and we've observed it with like the all-time greats with sitcoms, where season 1 is about finding your footing with characters more so than it is even like hitting the comedic beats, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't necessarily like a cause for concern, because I'm with this show, I think, till the end. for better or worse. But do you feel like we have any, with some characters we do, but for the most part, I still feel like they don't know who several of the main characters are after 10 episodes, which I guess
Yeah.
is kind of fair because a typical sitcom, you would get like a 20 episode order for a season, and they've only had 10.
That's what sets How I Met Your Mother apart. Go back, like, as the show still is awkward and having growing pains in season one, the characters were inherently who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, like you're saying, you're going through rewatching it, as am I. Those characters, Ted, Barney, Rob, like and Marshall, they are all like, just, it's almost like they knew exactly what they were. This show, like Ellen, who is Ellen supposed to be? Who's Jesse supposed to be? I don't even know yet.
Yeah.
Um, and you're right. You got to give it room to grow, and maybe we only got 10 episodes, and that's part of it. But I'm glad we're getting to see growth here. But yeah, the show still has a lot of room to grow if it wants to be consistent.
And I fall, man, I'm, we all love nostalgia porn and, fan service. And that's why I'm here. And I think the show gets that. It's like, we're going to get you in with the How I Met Your Mother hook. And hopefully we can keep you and get you to stick around with the actual merits of the show, which I'm totally fine with that premise. I don't think it's a bait and switch. But what I'm starting to ask myself is, at what point am I going to want this show to basically just be How I Met Your Mother? And is the show going to resist that?
Yeah.
Does that
I
make
think
sense? Like, is it going to want its own identity and I'm going to fight that?
I think it is. It has to, right? Like, it's the Disney, like I've mentioned this. It's the Disney live action effect. Who you want, Aladdin or Lion King, and to be shot for shot remakes. And then we complain about how we just saw the exact same thing.
We don't know
Or
what we want. We want a
or
bitch.
do we want them to be fucking Mulan that changes everything? And we're like,
Oh,
what the fuck? They changed everything. It's terrible. Like, we are part of the problem. If it's not How I Met Your Mother, we're frustrated because we want this. We miss that. We need that. But if we're seeing repetitiveness, we're also annoyed.
I think, and let me know if you agree or disagree here, but I think one of the reasons why How I Met Your Mother is my favorite sitcom is it's one of those rare sitcoms for us generationally that was a pretty big hit, and we were able to finish it like currently.
Mhm.
Like, it was appointment television on network TV when the show ended. And probably more importantly, we had I had a pretty visceral emotional connection to the show and how the characters ended up. Like, I really cared. I know people felt that way with Friends. Not so much Seinfeld, just because of the nature of the show. It was sort
Right.
of like the anti-sitcom. But I think one of the reasons why I'm going to gravitate to the show and give it every benefit of the doubt is I miss caring so much emotionally about like a week to week show, if that makes sense. That isn't like I'm not like a mom or dad staying at home watching like a daytime soap opera.
Yeah. That's what set How I Met Your Mother apart. And I think so. I think that's why. I mean, this is turning into How I Met Your Mother conversation, but that's why How I Met Your Mother also never had the higher ratings that a Friends had or Seinfeld had,
Yeah.
because How I Met Your Mother required that
It was
connection.
serialized.
Like, you could not come in randomly, and like, if you put on a random I remember this happened to me before I started How I Met Your Mother from the beginning, which you got me started on. I had seen a random episode. It was season 4. It was live on TV, and it was just on TV, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't get almost any of the jokes because, like, they're not like ha ha humor.
It's
It's
all inside
character
baseball, I
developed
guess. I
humor.
forgot
Yeah,
about
it's inside joke, and so I remember, and then I got to that episode again. I was like, oh my god, this is a fucking amazing episode. So, How I Met Your Father, I think it needs to kind of decide what it wants to be, because I felt like some of the episodes, at least from the first season, were trying to be like one-offs, but at the same time create a story that we're not connected to yet.
Yeah. I'm there though. I'll give it every benefit of the doubt, and I think knowing this is how I Met Your Mother always functioned better. They have long runway here with season 2. You have a full season order. We'll probably talk in a future episode about the debated. I think Hulu's gone back and forth on how they want to release the season,
Yeah.
but I think it will succeed well. I think season 2 will be better than season 1. Let me just put it that way.
I hope so. Yeah. And And maybe we'll get more cameos. I want to give away who we saw, but we saw some cool cameos in season 1, at least the biggest one too, which we loved.
I mean, again, anyone who complains about fan service, like I'm sorry, I don't get it. Like
We're fans. That's the
we're
point.
fans. I love geeking out and seeing fucking people and characters on screen that I want to see. I don't care if
Yeah.
it's like a cheap gimmick in some cases. Do it. I
Yeah.
want.
That's what we knew about How I Met Your Father too. We were hoping to see. We wanted fan service. Like honestly, we're not going to deny that.
Right. I would be disappointed, way more upset if they didn't give me something like that.
Yeah.
And I feel satisfied. It's honestly, dude, that can cover up a lot of the warts of the show if you just give me I'm like a dog, right? Like,
yeah,
you can ignore me and not pet me all day, but if you come home and you have like a bacon strip, then I'm like, all right, well, fuck.
Dude, I'm gonna go on record here. I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm gonna say 0% chance we ever get Josh Radnor or Jason Segel.
0%. Wow.
Maybe. Fuck. I think we are very likely to see others, including the mother.
Correct. Yeah, I think so too. Here's the thing. The reason I think we could get Josh Radnor back is I think the pitch with his character and the mother, based on the timeline, could actually be like not some fun cameo. It could be like really serious. And all I'm saying is one of the characters is a doctor, is all that.
I'm not saying I'm with you. I'm saying the potential is there. I just don't know. Like the way Jason Segel and Josh Radnor are about like their time with the show. Like, fuck, man.
I agree.
I hope I'm wrong.
I would be shocked though. Like, to me, I feel like Allison Hannigan would be game to play ball. I don't want to spoil like who did show up. I feel like
Neil Patrick Harris
would be game to play ball. Yeah, I think there's potential for all of them to show up. All right, ready to move on to the very end of our show. Or do you even lift bruh segment? We don't have Brian Boehner here to make the bird noise, but this is where we ask a question in the world of movies or TV, and then we leave you all with it. And the question now, Cycly, the continuing question, is what are the bros' top 100 movies of all time? So there's a link in the description of this podcast taking you to a Google Sheets where all of the bros, since the start of the year, have been counting down our top 100 movies list of all time. And as we always do, Cycly, for those who may be new to the podcast, how would you describe our top 100 list? Because it's not some film festival's top 100 pieces of cinema of all time. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, this is unique to you and only you. And that's what makes this fun. It makes every list different. It makes every list argumentative. It makes you think we're idiots. It makes you think we're brilliant. But that's at the end of the day, it's your list that for any reason, was it because you grew up with it at a certain time, you watched a film after a breakup or after falling in love or after something horrible happened, it doesn't matter. Like this list is your impactful films, and it's never going to be unique to or identical to anyone else's.
Exactly. You don't have to defend these movies, but we will because they're special to us. And again, it's not what we think are the top 100 finest made pieces of cinema, like Cycly said. It's your list, man. Fuck anyone who disagrees with you. Yep. And on that note, speaking of fighting, you're up to your number 72 movie of all time, and your number 73 film of all time was Gangs of New York. So what is the movie one ahead of that at number 72?
So it's funny. I mentioned on the Gangs of New York how Gangs of New York should be higher just on paper. This movie I'm about to say also should be higher on paper. Not to say these are bad movies. They're clearly in my top 100. I'm just saying when you get the cast and when you get the plot, like these movies could be so much higher. It's V for Vendetta for me.
For Vendetta.
Great movie. I think someone else has already had it on their list so far. So V for Vendetta, Hugo Weaving, Natalie Portman, who was always my
97. Sorry,
you had okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Is like for me, the plot of the movie, I've always been a very political, historical driven person. Like my major in college was political science. Like that's always been my thing. So this movie, just watching like a kind of not apocalyptic, but kind of like, authoritarian government takeover after, I think the movie, happens after not a pandemic, but in the sense like there was some sickness going on and revolution, and basically this authoritarian government comes like after World War III, and is very dark, ominous, like what can happen with a big figurehead, Nazi-esque almost. And, Natalie Portman, who's a character who doesn't support the government, but finds herself accidentally involved in this revolution with this mass figure. And again, on paper, this movie is like fucking like, wow, this should be just maybe in my top 20. I'm not, so I don't want to like actually criticize it, but compliment it. Like, it is just, I love the tone. I love the music. I love the ability to just convey like the time and the era and how they made everything simple, a crime. Their versions of their Gestapo and how they just arrest anyone and beat anyone without question. It's a very good movie for right now, especially what's going on in Europe. And what's happening post pandemic and what you're seeing in society. Natalie Portman, I think the acting is great. Hugo Weaving, who, he had such a great like period there in the like late 90s and early 2000s, between like Matrix and Lord of the Rings and V for Vendetta. I'm like, dude, the guy was just hitting bangers all day. I think the flaws of the movie are just that it just doesn't fulfill some of the depths it's trying to convey. Like it just kind of like it's at the 1 yard line, but it's not crossing it. I don't know what exactly it needed to do to cross it. It just doesn't have that. I feel like that's the difference between this movie being 72 and this movie being top 20. Because again, the concept of the movie to me is fantastic.
Do you think, and I know it's based on a graphic novel, but do you think it gets a little too, I don't know a better way to say this, graphic novel-y in terms of the visualization because it's the Wachowskis? Like, do you think that takes away from it, or do you think that's sort of a nice, unique thing that it does?
I mean, like, it makes me think of like The Watchmen or, like those type of, like, you're going for the graphic novel. I don't think that personally gave me any negative side of it. It might have reduced its dramatic effect or seriousness. Like, I think you could very much tell the same movie in a very just darker tone, which is a dark movie already. But I think you have a point there. The comic element, I should say, not comedic, does kind of take away the surface level seriousness and the sound effects, especially with like V's weapons.
And the way he like even throws the knives is a little bit like, okay. Really?
Yeah, so I think you could have easily made this movie like Dark Knight, like Batman seriousness, like Christopher Nolan vibes. But and maybe that's the difference. Maybe that is what crosses the line to me, that gets it to a top 30 movie or top 20 movie. But again, that's not an insult. This movie is a fantastic film, and I would happily like put it on anytime. So if you have never seen V for Vendetta, this is a very good time to watch it.
Anytime someone like messes something up, like if I place an order on DoorDash and they get it wrong, I go, "We are drowning in the avalanche of your inadequacies, Mr. Creedy." Or Mr. Creedy.
Oh, yeah. And we should watch it on November the 5th, to be honest, if you haven't watched it. So
we really should. Also, I know you're more of an Anglophile than I am, but this is like the first time that it really came into my consciousness what bollocks meant.
Oh, God.
Because they say it all.
Can we do a commentary only in a British accent the whole time? Bollocks.
Don't even tempt me. Good entry. And I say that because I have it in my list as well at number 97. My number 72 movie of all time. My number 73, by the way, was Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt. And my number 72 is the comedic film from 2007. And the only time I've ever found John Heder at all humorous, and that is Blades of Glory.
I can't believe this made not in a bad way. Like, I love this film. I didn't know this was going to make your top 100.
It's just so fucking quotable, man. No. Craig T. Nelson as the coach is pretty much incredible as well.
Yes.
And God, Will Arnett in it. I think the hardest, aside from Wedding Crashers, I've ever laughed in theaters is when him and Amy Poehler who play a brother and sister skating combo, which with this weird sexual tension.
Well, it's true. Okay, come on. First of all, you watch ice skating like in the
I know, I
Olympics,
totally agree.
and you're like, they say they're twins or brother sister. I'm just like, this doesn't feel right.
Correct. It's very wrong. And Jenna Fisher, who of course is Pam in The Office, plays their
God,
sister, who they're trying to like guilt trip to do things for them over the death of their mother, who was like driving to pick her up from like a skating competition or something. It has nothing to do with her, but and Amy Poehler is telling a story about their mom, and she goes, "So, Mom," and Will Arnett interrupts her and goes, "Remember how she used to be alive?" And he's on a bearskin rug, like stroking it.
can I say really quickly? Like, I always thought Jenna Fisher was, she's cute. Like, I never like thought she was like just a bombshell or anything. God, this movie, I was like, okay, all right, Jenna. Like, I mean, they do it on purpose when she's trying to get with Will, but I'm just like, I did not see the side of you in The Office.
Yeah,
Not gonna mind. I don't mind it.
No, this upped the ante for sure. And another thing that I just found really relatable because like politicians and athletes do this too. But Will Ferrell's character went Chaz Michael Michaels, which again, incredible fucking name.
Mm-hmm.
But when he learns that he has to partner up with Jimmy McElroy in the doubles competition, he's at a press conference and a reporter's like, "What about the quote where you said Jimmy McElroy was a piece of shit and shouldn't be allowed to skate?" And he goes, "Well, actually, that quote's taken out of context. If you had the rest of the quote?" And the guy goes, "I do have the rest of the quote." And it says here, "And I will never take back any of these words. Fuck him. He's a piece of shit." And he's like, "Well, here's a new quote for you." It's like, okay, so we're just going to act like you didn't say that.
It's like you can't hate like people who are like, "Oh, I fucking hate Will Ferrell movies. He does the same." I'm like, dude, but you know what? Some like we talked about with the reality TV. So like, you know what? Sometimes it's great to put his movies on and just be like, dude, I'm gonna turn my brain off and laugh at the stupidest shit.
And this is one, it's not even close to my highest Will Ferrell movie on this list. Like, we'll get into those much later. But if you ever were like, "Hey, man, I have this on," no one has DVDs anymore, but like, you want to throw this on streaming, I don't think if we were like about to go out to the bars and we had an hour to kill, I don't think I would ever say no to putting on Some Glory.
Yeah. I'm with you completely.
Another great quote. They're about to go to bed, like after they've recently started rooming together as part of their training. And he's like, "Chaz, you okay with like, you need a light on or something?" He goes, "Yes, I do. The night's a very dark time for me." McElroy goes, "It's a dark time for everyone." And he goes, "Not Alaskans or dudes with night vision goggles." What? Blades of Glory.
My God, we should eventually, long after we're done with the Top 100, do just a Will Ferrell ranking.
That'd be interesting to see.
That would be a fun one. Because you could be all over the place. Because like someone might hate fucking Talladega Nights, or someone might fucking hate Blades of Glory.
Dude, you and I were in the group for a long time that Step Brothers just did not click.
No, dude, we almost walked out.
We did. That's crazy to say, but it's so true. Yeah. Like, I think we actually asked each other, and we were like, "Fuck it, whatever, let's just stay."
Yeah.
We can't drive yet anyway. We don't have a ride.
Yeah. That'd be a fun one.
It's definitely got to be done at some point. All right, Cycly, before we let the people go for episode 181, any closing thoughts, words of wisdom, or just legal advice you want to give away for free?
Oh, no, I definitely don't want to give away legal advice because come pay me. I do not work for free. But you know what? If you're driving on the highway and you find yourself in the left lane and a car is right behind you, get on over to the middle or the right lane because you're in the fast lane and the left lane is for passing only. So unless you're passing a car, get on over to the right lane.
Yeah, the fast lane isn't just a metaphor for how we live our life. It's an actual place on the road. No.
You should not be just staying in the fast lane permanently. Yeah. I'm telling you, you might be asking, why does Cycly always keep saying this recently? I moved a few months ago to a new state, and for some reason, the custom in the state is we don't give a shit where we'll drive. I'll drive 50 in all 3 lanes, and everyone will suffer for it.
Let me just say, it might be, a weird recency bias, but every time I move to a state that sucks worse at driving.
I don't understand it. I didn't think people could get worse from where I came from.
But you're like, all right, well, at least we're in the worst fucking state. No, we're not.
Nope. And I love it because everyone who lives here says the same thing. They're like, "Oh yeah, it's terrible here." I'm like, "Oh good, you know it, and you continue to do
I was
it."
going to say, at a certain point, though, we're a part of the problem, not the solution.
Yes.
All that I will end with is some other advice, and that's when you're going to get your hair cut, make smart decisions. This is not the time to try something new. We're not at a cheesecake factory on a Thursday night, okay? We're not going to experiment. It's a fucking haircut. Be smart. If you're over 30 years old and you're a male, we don't need to put any type of dye in that thing. And if you don't have a job, you need to fucking get one to where like this would be detrimental to your fiscal situation.
Can I add to that, because I just got my haircut and I told the guy like, "Hey, leave it longer on top."
Yeah.
And then I finally looked. It's one of those like they turn you around at the end to be like, "Ta-da!" And I was like, "Dude, you fucking cut my hair so short." Like, I literally told you. So you know what? Not only tell them what you want, but make sure they understand what you want.
Yeah. That's another good point. If they don't understand what you're asking for, you might as well have a fucking hedgehog do it.
Yeah,
His ass.
you're at the wrong place.
Doesn't matter. All right, for our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli, I'm the mayor, Jeff Hornacek, and we are the Bro 4 Squad podcast. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Follow us on Twitter at Bro 4 Squad. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Letterboxd, anywhere you find your podcast. If you type in Bro Force Squad as 3 separate words, and check out our website and our running top 100 list, as well as all of the content we have ever posted in the history of time. Bro4squad.com. Till next time, signal to the right and get over from the fucking fast lane. You don't belong there. Ford Explorer with a soccer mom and 6 kids. That's great. Live your life. Be safe. You're in the wrong lane, honey.
Yep. It's not for you, man.